皆様お待たせいたしました。今日最後のゲストスピーカーでございます。アメリカからの社長様で、マシュー・ハーヴェイ・サンダースさん、社長様でございまして、リソースのところに、ゲストスピーカーさんのプロフィールなどがございますので、どうぞご覧ください。また、日本語や他の言語にされる方は CC と書かれたアイコンのところをご自分の好きな言語にチェンジしていただければ、通訳のサービスになっております。では、マシュー・ハーヴェイ・サンダースさんです。マシュー・ハーヴェイ・サンダースさんは、元歩兵将校かつ神学生であり、ロングビアードの創設者兼最高責任者です。同社の主力製品、マジステリアム AI は世界最大級のカトリック教義検索エンジンであり、165カ国以上のユーザーにご利用いただいております。ロングビアードはさらに、ローマの教皇庁立大学群と連携した歴史的デジタル化プロジェクトを支える先進的図書館プラットフォーム Vulgate AI を開発。本年後半には世界初となるカトリック教義を学習した AI エフレムのリリースを予定しております。お願いします。
Okay, so welcome, Matthew. Thank you very much for making time to present today. Harvey Sanders is a former infantry officer and seminarian, is the founder and CEO of Longbeard. The company's flagship product, Magisterium AI, is the world's leading Catholic answer engine, serving users in over 65 countries. Longbeard also developed Vulgate AI, an advanced library platform powering a historic digitization project with the Pontifical Universities in Rome. Later this year, the company will release Ephraim, the world's first trained Catholic AI. So with that, I'd like to welcome you, Matthew, to take it away. And thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. So AI, why it's too important a technology to ignore. So I have quite a few slides because there's quite a bit of ground we have to cover. I'm hoping to leave time for questions afterwards. So I'll try and bang through this as efficiently as possible. And if there's anything that is unclear at the end, you can just ask me about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I thought I'd start with a quote from Sundar Pichai. So this is the CEO of Google, which is one of the definitive leaders in AI at present. So he thinks, I think AI is probably the most important thing humanity has ever worked on. I think of it as something more profound than electricity or fire. Electricity or fire. It's just pretty remarkable to hear someone make that comparison. But I think by the end of the presentation, I think you'll understand why the industry is so enthusiastic about this technology and how it really is kind of an epic shift for humanity. So just a little bit of a context. So Facebook, one of the biggest platforms, we all know it, today reached 1 million users in 10 months. And as will come as not a big surprise to many of you, ChatGPT reached 1 million users in 5 days, which is extraordinary, unprecedented in human history as far as growth goes. Today, around 4 in 5 companies deem AI to be a top priority in their business strategy. And if we look here at this graph, this is AI use by organizations in the world. And this is a comparison between 2023 and 2024. And you can see the pink is 2023, the blue is 2024. This is quite a dramatic jump from 2023 to 2024. And we're expecting the comparison between 2024 and 2025 to be a very similar jump. So that's quite remarkable. You can see that the rise in use of AI globally across the entire world is pretty consistent. So this is a transition which is impacting the entire world. Mm-hmm. It's said that 19 in every 20 customer interactions will be AI assisted by the end of this year, which again is remarkable. Every time you call a customer service line, at some point AI is going to be used, whether you're talking to an AI directly or if the person that you're speaking to, the human being, is using AI to find an efficient answer to your query. So I thought before going on, it might be helpful to kind of just do a quick overview of the various kind of levels of artificial intelligence. Now, this isn't a perfect model, but I still think it's useful. This was released by OpenAI. So level 1 AI is chatbots. So AIs with conversational language, and all of us know those have most certainly arrived and are being used around the world. The next step up from there is reasoners. And when I say reason in quotation marks, but these are AIs which are capable of human-level problem solving. And certainly within certain domains, AIs have achieved this, at least to some extent. They still lack something I'll talk about more, fluid intelligence, but they are capable of some basic problem solving. Most people would concede that we've achieved level 2 AI. So level 3 is agents. So these are AI systems that can take actions autonomously on your behalf. So you give it an objective, and then it will go out and actually achieve that objective online or on your operating system. So I mean, level 3 is certainly we've arrived in the age of agents, but I still think we're in very early innings, meaning we're at the very beginning of the level 3. There's still a lot more work to be done here, but most people would concede we certainly are in the midst of level 3. So level 4, which some people would call artificial general intelligence, and just quickly, the distinction between artificial general intelligence and artificial narrow intelligence. Today, the AI systems that we're interacting with every day, so the level 1, level 2, and level 3 AIs, are examples of artificial narrow intelligence, meaning it's AI which has been trained to be exceptional in very specific domains. But unlike a human being, which is a general intelligence, which we possess something called fluid intelligence, which effectively what that means is that we're able to operationalize or efficiently employ past experience and to apply it to new circumstances, which enables us the ability to adapt and learn efficiently. AIs are not currently capable of doing this that effectively. A lot of their intelligence is really focused on domains that have very, very verifiable answers, such as like STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So artificial general intelligence, if you were to define it, and I like to use the definition of Demis Hassabis, who's the CEO of Google's AI division called DeepMind. He tends to think of the human brain as a Turing machine. Alan Turing was the kind of the father of modern computing systems, and he tended to think of a Turing machine would be a machine capable of computing anything that can be computed. And so the human brain, in principle, is capable of computing anything that is computable. And so in principle, an AGI would be able to do at least what a human being can do. And so AIs, in this case, OpenAI defines it as innovators. So AIs that can aid in invention. And we haven't yet achieved AGI. There's some technological breakthroughs that will have to be achieved before we can effectively say we've arrived in the era of AGI. But effectively, all of the AI labs are all chasing AGI because it'll be a massive unlock for technological progress. We'll talk more about that later. So we have not reached level 4. And then finally, level 5, which this is a definition of artificial superintelligence, there are others, would be AIs which are capable of doing the work of an entire organization. And so, of course, some others would define artificial superintelligence as an AI system whose computational capabilities exceed that of the entire human race. And so obviously, we're not near close to ASI. AGI would have to be achieved, presumably, before we could get to artificial superintelligence. What has been remarkable to see is the rapid progress of AI's development just in the last year. So what you're looking at here is a plot of AIs achieving certain thresholds in what we call benchmarks. This is a way of evaluating the capabilities of AI in different domains. So here what we're seeing is a few different benchmarks. Frontier math, so advanced mathematics, the ARC AGI, which is an abstract reasoning corpus, which is effectively testing for fluid intelligence or general intelligence. SWE-bench, which is a benchmark for evaluating real-world software engineering problems. GPQA, which is graduate-level science questions. And then IAME is another math. It's a competitive math benchmark. And you can see with the arrival of reasoning models, so large reasoning models, at the end of 2024, you can see there was a massive increase in capability. And this effectively has been consistent and since the release of these models. So again, things the accelerated computing is only continuing to accelerate. These models are getting more and more capable, faster and faster, and as a result, it's becoming very difficult for us to even benchmark these AIs. It's going to be more difficult to even test them against human capability. Now, so what's driving all of this progress in AI? Well, one way to talk about this is to discuss the scaling laws. Now, scaling laws, to put it simply, is the more data and the more compute you assign or dedicate to training a model, the smarter it gets. Effectively, that's the scaling law. So more data, more compute, smarter models. And effectively, the way we've gone about building AI systems predominantly has been built on something called pre-training, or another way of calling this would be like the imitation phase, where we're effectively teaching an AI to replicate, to identify patterns in training data and imitate the way a human being would recall information or think. This is the pre-training phase. But now we've discovered there's another way to enhance or continue progress in AI, and that's called post-training. And so there's a bunch of different approaches to post-training. One is called direct preference optimization, where human beings evaluate AI's answers and then tell it which ones are good and which ones are bad, and that sends signal to the model so it knows, to help it optimize based upon human preferences. But the one that's been most transformative is called reinforcement learning, where effectively you give an AI a problem and you have it work through the problem, and then you verify if at the end of having worked through the problem, if it got it right or wrong. If it gets it right, you reward it. If it gets it wrong, you tell it try again. This reinforcement lane, or this kind of autonomous learning, is one of the key unlocks to getting to AGI. At least that's thought today by most researchers. And then finally, we have this test time scaling or long thinking. And this is initially when this came out, this was really described a lot as chain of thought, where the AI can spend more time thinking over a problem. So it talks to itself. Sometimes it'll have search attached to it, where it'll think about various possible ways to solve a problem and then pick the one that thinks works the best. So the more time you give an AI to think, the better it typically does. Translate into big time results, but these results are not limited to a particular AI group or lab. What we're seeing is a lot of these breakthroughs, they disperse fairly quickly throughout the industry, which is quite interesting. And so you can see here, this is a plot of frontier language models intelligence. So this is testing raw intelligence of models for the best models in the world. And here what we're seeing is the labs which are responsible for building these models. And you can see Chinese models, American models, across the board, we're seeing quite consistent progress. And so it's not one lab that's really pulling ahead here. There's now multiple labs which are actively competing. What's quite remarkable here is if you take a look at the Moonshot AI, which is a lab out of China. They just released a model called Kimi 2, which is basically on par with the best model in the world, ChatGPT 5. Some would argue now Gemini 3 from Google's the best, right up there, which is quite remarkable. Again, if we take a look at now before we're looking at labs. So these are the people responsible for the models. Now we're looking at individual models and taking a look at the artificial and basically the intelligence index, the smartest models in the world. Now GPT-3 is not yet, it's just been released by Google, and it's now the #1 in the world. But you can see here, again, just to state, these models, you have OpenAI's GPT-5, you have a Chinese Moonshot AI's Kimi 2, then you have Grok 4, that's Elon Musk's company, XAI, and then you have Anthropic 4.5. Again, a lot of labs releasing models which are quite comparable in intelligence. And again, we talked a little bit about the difference between pre-training and post-training and this whole reinforcement learning and kind of long thinking. And so today, all the models that are basically achieving the highest thresholds on intelligence are really the result of these reasoning models, as opposed to the non-reasoning models, which are simply the ones that are pre-trained but don't have this long thinking capability. One other big breakthrough has been context window. And so the way to think of context window is kind of like short-term memory for models. The more short-term memory they have, the more you can works in context you can give to the models that they can reflect on before answering. And we had a massive unlock. Google was one of the first to release a model with 1 million context window. And now Grok, which is Elon Musk's company, has released Grok 4.1 Fast, which has a 2 million context window. And that's quite remarkable. A million token context windows, basically like inciting almost an encyclopedia inside of its short-term memory. And so again, a big breakthrough that's affecting AI in really profound ways. And like I said before, AI is becoming so difficult for us to benchmark, meaning it's saturating the benchmarks we have for it. We've actually had to create a new benchmark. This one's called Humanity's Last Exam, which is a pretty provocative title, created by Scale AI and the Center for AI Safety. And effectively what they did here is they went to like Pulitzer level people. So these are the smartest people in the world, and they asked them to come up with problems that only a few handful of people in the world would be able to solve. And then they created this new benchmark called Humanity's Last Exam. What's been remarkable is some people thought it would be 10 years before AIs would be able to make effective progress on Humanity's Last Exam. And again, this doesn't capture Gemini 3.0, which came out this week. But you can see here, quite remarkably, I know this is a very busy graph, but if you look at GPT-5 up here at the top, GPT-5 High, and Kimi 2, the Chinese moonshot AI lab, they basically are effectively getting to 25% of this exam. So effectively, AI today has been able to do, and I believe Gemini is now up to past 30% now. They've been able to effectively solve 30% of the hardest problems that humanity has been able to come up with. So if you think about a year from now, given the rapid progress you've seen here, it wouldn't be shocking to me if they were doing something like 85 to 90% of humanity's last exam. We'll have to see, but again, remarkable progress. Now, I talked earlier about fluid intelligence and how important a general intelligence is, and there's new benchmarks that have been created in order to kind of capture this what it takes to actually practice fluid intelligence. How do we benchmark it, and how do we test AIs on their fluid intelligence? And so this ARC, which stands for Abstract Reasoning Corpus Benchmark, tests AIs for fluid intelligence. So this is the general intelligence, the kind of intelligence that we have. And you can see too, again, it was thought that AIs would be pretty bad at this, and they were for quite some time. But just recently, we've seen some remarkable progress on the ARC AGI 2 board. ARC AGI 1, the first one, has almost been saturated. So this is the second one, which is harder. And you can see there's a couple of researchers, E. Pang and Jay Berman, took a Grok 4 and post-trained it, and they've been able to receive just under 30% on this benchmark. Again, remarkable progress in a very limited amount of time. And what's also incredible is as these AIs get more intelligent, the cost of delivering these models is actually going down. We call this a Jevons paradox. The cheaper these models become to run, the more demand there is actually to use them, which is pretty intuitive. And so again, what we're seeing is they're building inference clusters, are building large-scale amounts of compute, because there's so much demand for these models now that we have to keep scaling up the amount of inference compute available, which means the ability to serve the models to people around the world. This is what inference means, that we have to keep scaling it. And because the cost of these models is coming down, we're able to effectively do that more effectively. Now, with the capability of AI increasing and the costs going down, effectively it's thought at some point, it was projected here on this paper called Situational Awareness by Leopold Aschenbrenner, who's a former researcher at OpenAI. At some point around 2027, maybe 2028, some people say it'll be sooner, we're going to hit something called the intelligence explosion. And what this basically means is at some point it's thought that the AIs will achieve something called FARSI, which is fully autonomous, recursive self-improvement. That means the ability for AIs to actually improve themselves. And effectively, once they achieve this capability, it's thought that they will just explode. And so, of course, once we have these AIs which are able to teach themselves, effectively copying them and basically printing millions of them would have huge implications on our world. I mean, and so I think that in many ways this is extremely exciting. This is I'm not going to play this video, but this is Sal Khan. He's the founder of Khan Academy, which is one of the most important educational online education platforms in the world, particularly in India. And what he's doing here is he's having ChatGPT teach his son geometry. And so his son is able to talk to the AI The AI is able to see the screen and it's coaching him through geometry problem. And again, so if you think about something like education, the ability of AI to kind of master these subjects and then effectively adapt its pedagogical approach. So adapt the way it teaches for each individual student to help them succeed. I mean, this could be absolutely enormous. And the fact that we can do this for a very, very low price, and anyone in the world can take advantage of this technology. As long as you have a phone, effectively you can access an AI which can teach you really any skill. This is a remarkable for humanity. I think all of us, we have good reason to want to celebrate this. Of course, when I talk about AI, I think many of us think about these disembodied intelligences which live in large compute clusters, but it's important to think about physical AI or embodied AI, robots, aka robots. I know Japan is quite famous for robots, as is China. So you're very familiar with the robotic paradigm. But what we're seeing now is robots powered by increasingly intelligent and increasingly generalized AI. Now, so you're looking at two robots here, Figure 3 and Tesla Optimus. I believe this is 5 that they're demoing here. Now, these robots, there's still some work to be done here, but effectively, and I could get much more into this in the question period if you're interested, in the next 2 years, these AIs will have these robots will have an AI in them, which is smarter than most people, in some cases by a fair margin, and have a fairly good general understanding of how to operate in the world. And these will start to be manufactured at scale. And you'll start seeing these things enter the workforce. And given that our world was built for human beings, meaning it requires kind of 10 fingers, and really in order to effectively operate in this world, and these robots having the capability to effectively use the same kind of dexterity to do things like make us coffee or clean our house or potentially even drive. These have the possibility to massively, again, to disrupt our world economy. Some would say this is an excellent thing. Some could see that this obviously could be a big problem, especially if our governments are not prepared to manage this transition. Because obviously companies will face increasing pressure to fully automate their work. They'll face fierce competitive pressure to do this. And of course, that will mean having to let human beings go. And then the question is, what do we do with these people who have been replaced by robots and AI? And some people say, oh, that's not true. It's years and years away. And I'd like to point them to this graph. This is a graph from Indeed, which is a very prominent job posting board. And this is a graph plotting software development job postings. And you can see back in middle to late 2022, early 2023, there was this peak. I mean, being a software engineer was the best job in the world. Working for Google, working for Microsoft, all these companies, that was what it's all about. And you had millions of young people who are training to be engineers to work at these companies. And then with the delivery of AI, you've seen it tank. And so there's a lot of young people who are training to be software engineers who now are coming to the recognition that they may not be able to get hired. So now the question is, well, what do we do now? And just to say, one of the reasons why AI does so well in coding is because of these verifiable rewards. We're able to actually build tests for them, and we can verify if the AIs have actually successfully passed the test. Some domains, like the arts, poetry, humanities, it's not as easy, right, to develop tests there, because what constitutes a pass for a poem or a fail? And so it's more difficult for AI in these domains. But for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, because we can verify when the AIs have got something right, they uniquely tend to excel at this, which is why right now some jobs are more under threat than others. For those interested, I mean, people wonder, what are people talking or using AI for? This is a plot that came from OpenAI and Anthropic, demonstrating how AIs are predominantly being used by their users. And this may come as a surprise to some, maybe not to others. So how-to advice, you can see about nearly 10%. Asking questions for specific information, that's around 20%. You can see editing or critiquing text, that's 10%, and personal writing or communication. So for the most part, a lot of these AI use cases are kind of related to work and stuff, and not as much for kind of personal relationships and reflection, you can see that actually is sitting around 1.9%. So I think sometimes there's a lot of like rumors and hype that AI is being used as a life coach. And what we're seeing here is not quite yet. That's not to say that it won't be for some soon, but right now you're seeing it's predominantly being focused kind of in work and tutoring use cases. Just another point which is interesting. As AIs get more intelligent, one thing that we're noticing is it's harder to change their values. So this is pretty interesting. So this is I think in some ways good. You would think that as the AIs become more intelligent and we get better at ensuring that they're trained on higher quality data sets, so less like Reddit and other chat forums, more on encyclopedic knowledge, you'd expect them to kind of come to some kind of meta ethic, right? And so in some ways this is probably good. In other ways, it could be bad. So for instance, you may train an AI to basically service entire human population, so 6 billion people, and effectively it's trained to align with all of those people's value systems. Okay, that's fine. But if I'm a Catholic and I want to make sure that the AI truly is aligned with my belief system, the AI could actually demonstrate some resistance to that. Effectively, you'd have to actually train it with an objective function to be faithful to the magisterium. And that would mean it wouldn't be as useful or aligned with other people. So this is one of the strong reasons we feel that Catholics have to take responsibility and we have to train our own AI systems. I share this one, not so you'll sleep better at night, obviously, but I do think it's an important thing to reflect on. Now, this is from 2023, but I think that the analysis would still hold. This is quite remarkable. The average AI engineer thinks there is a roughly 40% chance that AI destroys the world. Remarkable, right? Mm. So when you think about this, you'd think this is insane. 40% chance. What are we doing here? We should stop this thing, right? We should stop this. I mean, think about any other technology or any other field in which someone was developing something that had this kind of probability of destroying all of us. Well, of course we'd stop it, right? But we're not with AI. We're not, despite the fact that some of the smartest people working on this think there's such a high probability. So why? Why haven't we stopped this? Well, we've tried twice. There was 2 big prominent pause movements. Elon Musk was a signer of the first. But effectively, the reasons I don't think will surprise many of you, but has little to do with moral reasons or even existential reasons. It has to do with business reasons in large part and security reasons. This is primarily, in my opinion, the reason why the AI pause movement has failed. Effectively, we're competing with China. And this is considered to be a fight we cannot lose. The first person to get to artificial general intelligence will use it to get to artificial superintelligence. And artificial general intelligence will provide enormous, and not even artificial general intelligence, I mean, even advanced forms of artificial neural intelligence will provide incredible economic and military advantages to one side if they're more advanced and further along than the other. And so it's just generally thought that we can't allow one country to run away with AI because it could be due to destabilizing. So both the United States and China are investing more and more and more into AI to effectively to stay ahead. So I think I want to reflect a little bit about this because I think this competition is quite fascinating if you look very closely at it. So what you're seeing here is a plot of global electricity consumption trends. Effectively, you're seeing basically energy demand and the capacity required to meet it. What's remarkable about this is that in order to power AI systems, now it's one thing to have a powerful AI, but if you don't have the compute, meaning the compute to power that AI, and you don't have the power to power the compute, you're not going to get very far, right? What good is an AI if you don't have lots of compute for it to use and the power to power those compute clusters? And this is one of the big problems that the West has. As you can see here, China has incredible manufacturing capacity. And they've been building energy capacity like crazy, far outstripping anywhere else in the world. Effectively, what this means is they have all the power they need, or the capacity to build all the power they need to power the compute in order to run these models. And ultimately, this is what it's going to come down to. The AI, having an advanced AI is important, but if you don't have the compute, ultimately won't matter too much. Another thing that's remarkable to me, if you look here at how much money is going into the development of AI, look at how much the United States has invested in AI development comparative to China and Europe. I mean, it's not even close, right? And despite all of that investment in AI, how is that translating into results? Okay, let me go into this and then I'll hop back to that. Well, this is what I find is remarkable. Despite all that money from the US, China is basically at parity with us in AI intelligence. Now, some would argue it's because, yes, that's because they steal all of our secrets and then they train on them, right? They integrate them into the research programs and in their AI development programs. That's true to some extent, but that's not entirely true because China has contributed some very profound research insights in the development of AI. So it's not as simple as saying that we invest all the money, we do all the research, and then China just steals it. That's not the case. So this is very important to acknowledge. We're spending a lot more heavily, but China is still very competitive when it comes to results. Now, part of this I think has to do with this chart. This is a chart of availability of computer science education by country, right? And so you can see here the blue is indicative that there is a program, computer science program, and where, and the purple is some, and at the lighter the purple, the least you see it. And if you look here, places like China, we could look at places like Russia, Eastern Europe, Australia. Computer science is mandatory in primary and secondary school, whereas you look at go over to North America, in some places it is. So this computer science literacy, right, is critical, because that basically what that means is because there's such a large amount of the population which is at least literate in computer science, that means there's more people they can draw from to apply to AI science and research, and that effectively provides a competitive advantage. I just want to point out as well, the U.S. is dumping a lot of money into AI research, but effectively that research is basically controlled by closed research labs. So these are companies like OpenAI and Google, which are not releasing contributing some open source models, but for the most part they're closed. China definitively is the leader in open source AI, which is incredibly important. So they basically build open source. They train it, and then they release it for the world to use. Remarkable. And this has actually had enormous impacts on the industry. And this is why some people feel that actually the path to AGI will likely be via open source, because effectively it allows more people to work with AI and to experiment with kind of leading models, as opposed to just a small lab working for one of the big companies. And I had mentioned before that China has contributed significant research findings. I mean, China here has unveiled something called Spike Brain, which is an AI that runs 100 times faster than rivals. It's an architecture that's modeled off the human brain. Quite remarkable. Again, this hasn't been scaled up into anything in production yet, but again, this is very promising. And basically what I'm trying to say here is that we shouldn't discount China's ability to innovate in the area of AI. It's a kind of a notable quote from Elon Musk. In a benign scenario, probably none of us will have a job. And I think this is important for us to think about, and kind of it leads to the next part of the talk. I'm going to try and bang through this next part quicker because I know we're carrying on here. Just very quickly, I want to talk about boomers and doomers. So boomers being people who are very bullish on AI, who think it's going to be great, right? And then doomers who think, no, it's probably going to ruin us all, right? Or there's a high probability it will, and we have to do something. So someone, Max Tegmark, who's a prominent professor at MIT, very notable, very respected. He would skew kind of doomer. He's trying to warn the world that these AIs that we're building, we don't truly understand them. Anthropic is notable for saying this. Effectively, we know how to grow AI, but we can't effectively build it. Now, what I mean by that is we set the conditions for AI, and then these capabilities, the ones we all come to know and appreciate, emerge. Multilingual understanding, reasoning, all these things. We don't exactly know how these AIs know how to do these things. We just know if we give it compute and data, these things just happen. They emerge. And he says this is a problem because we effectively know how to grow them, but we don't exactly know how they work, which means we're always going to be limited in our ability to we don't understand what's going on inside of their heads, and we'll always be limited in our ability to effectively guide them, right? Especially as they become more intelligent. And this could be a problem, because if you get an AI which is misaligned, meaning let's say it passes our safety benchmarks because it's very smart, but it's secretly concealing other intentions. Because we can't look inside of its head, to see this, effectively what that means is we could end up deploying an AI which seems to be safe, but in fact has its own interests. And that could end up bumping into our interests and causing a big problem. Jan LeCun, this is the former head of Meta's AI division, kind of a legend in the AI space. He thinks this is nonsense. He thinks that AI won't be, artificial general intelligence won't just emerge, right? It won't just come online all of a sudden, like in Hollywood. Artificial general intelligence will be built by multiple labs, and there'll be contributions from open source and closed source. This will be built in the open, and we'll find ways to effectively mitigate the downsides and the risks of AI. So not everyone agrees with people like Max. Elon, he's on record, same as Jeffrey Hinton, who's the godfather of AI, of saying there's likely a 20% chance that AI destroys us all. And this is one of the reasons why he started his AI program called XAI. Effectively, he wanted to train AI that was being that had kind of objective functions of being truthful, meaning it cannot lie, and is curious. And he's thinking that way, as AI becomes more and more intelligent, we want it to be curious about human beings, about what we're going to do. And he thinks that's a way to ensure that the AI doesn't end up feeling it has to compete with us or get us out of the way in order to progress. Father Philip Larray is one of the kind of the church's leading experts in AI and emerging technology. He would skew boomer. But I think he would concede as well that if we don't properly direct these technologies at tackling the right problems, and we don't have a clear understanding of what kind of world we need to build, that we could end up directing these AIs at the wrong problems, and that could end up leading to disaster. So in large part, this comes down to really thoughtfully thinking about how we develop AI, what problems we're focusing it on. And I just want to throw a little love to Pope Francis because, Pope Leo gets a lot of people have take note of his innumerable comments on AI, but really Pope Francis, I think, really got this started. And it's important to remember that. This is an image of him at the G7 summit, and he was invited by the G7 to address the world leaders to speak to one topic, and he chose to speak about AI. And that just goes to show you how much the church recognizes that this technology is going to be impacting the world, and how important it is for the church to have kind of a role and helping steer it, at least from a moral and spiritual perspective. So quickly, I just want to acknowledge there's a very important, I won't say competition, but certainly there's a rivalry between Catholics and I think this emerging transhumanist group. And I think it's important to acknowledge this. So here's two leaders in the AI industry. You have Alexander Wang, who used to be the CEO of Scale AI. He's now the head of Meta's artificial superintelligence division. So the young guy, very, very smart. And then we have Demis Hassabis, who's the CEO of DeepMind, which is Google's AI division. Alexander Wang was recently on a podcast, the Sean Ryan podcast. And he's a young man. So the podcast host asked him, so when are you planning to have kids, have a family? And Alexander said something that kind of shocked me. He said, well, I'd like to wait on having kids until Neuralink is more further developed. And for those of you who don't know, Neuralink is kind of Elon Musk's a computer interface company. Right now, they're using it to help restore people that have suffered neurological trauma and other forms. But effectively, it's thought to be a way to combine the human brain with machines, effectively expanding our computational capabilities, which is thought to help us, compete with machines, or at least remain relevant when it comes to machines and thinking. And some people think that ultimately what that's about is figuring out a way to transfer consciousness from a human biological substrate to an artificial one. So the fact that Alexander Wang is delaying having children until he can merge his child with a machine is quite striking. It's important to remember that a lot of the people that are leading the AI industry have this transhumanist vision. They believe the merging of man and machine is inevitable and a good thing. And I'm not saying these are bad people. I think these people believe that's a way of pursuing good, right? I mean, colonizing Mars right now for human beings is almost impossible considering the effects that would have on our human physiology. And some people think the best way to colonize Mars is to transfer human beings into machines, which can withstand the harsh conditions. So it's just important for us to understand that these transhumanists have a very different vision of the future, very different from the Catholic churches. And we have to make sure that we're effectively selling a better version, a more Catholic vision of the future, one that's more appealing to people than the transhumanist vision. Demis Hassabis, I just want to note that not everyone in in the AI industry is a hardcore transhumanist. I'm not saying Demis necessarily is or isn't, but Demis has made it clear, he's building AI because he's trying to, make human life better, like cure disease and things like that. So, not everyone is a prominent transhumanist in the industry. I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush. Obviously, I think this is why the Pope's leadership is so important in this. I think effectively we have to remind people of the telos. What is the purpose of humanity? What is the purpose of civilization? What is this all about? If we can get clear about what a better world is supposed to look like, let's say the city of God, as Augustine would say, then we can make sure that we're pointing the technologies at solving the right problems and building a better world. But we have to be united in our understanding of what constitutes a better world. Otherwise, other people will serve other visions of that, visions which we know ultimately won't lead to humanity being better off. Okay, and so it's quickly the dark path here. The dark path effectively would be if the church fails in its evangelization mission. Effectively, the dark path would be one in which human beings have time on their hands because all the jobs are gone. They don't have good human intellectual and spiritual formation. And so effectively, there's this real possibility of despair. And of course, then I'm sure there'll be plenty of distractions, gaming, VR, pornography. And effectively, that will lead people to go down this dark path and eventually go off what we call the existential cliff, right? I don't know why I matter. I've done everything under the sun. I don't think a life is worth living anymore. And this is one of the reasons why evangelization and Catholic AI I think is so important. The golden path is the alternative, where we do have good human intellectual and spiritual formation, and we have a clear sense for what kind of world we want to build, and we work backwards from that vision and ensure that we're developing technologies to solve the right problems and in right relationship with human beings. And this is one of the critical ways I think the church can have a positive impact. So how do we proceed? Well, Cardinal Collins used to always say to me, if you know where you're going, you'll be more likely to get there. So I think that's part of it. It's important for us to understand the facts, so understand where the technology is actually at and what its actual implications are likely to be. It's important to have the hard conversations. To actually have these conversations, we have to have a very robust civil conversation. All of us have to be involved in this conversation. We have to prioritize formation. We have to prioritize civic engagement, letting our voices be heard. And then we have to keep our eyes fixed ultimately on our North Star, which is, for Catholics, building the kingdom of God. For Catholic AI, we recently had a forum in Rome called the Builders AI Forum, which we brought together leaders from around the world to talk about this. And so we are actively trying to work on this to figure out how Catholics can use AI and how we should be building it effectively, how we can build it to serve the church's evangelization mission. Our approach as a company has been in building Catholic AI is to develop a number of products, all to help eventually build and scale Catholic AI. Magisterium AI, as was referred to in the introductions, by the grace of God, is the #1 answer engine for the Catholic faith in the world. Effectively, this is just an opportunity to use AI to make sure that all of church teaching and everything that the church has said, all the doctors and philosophers of the church, all of that insight and wisdom can be distilled and made useful to people to help add value and help them in their lives. Vulgate AI is a way to digitize the patrimony of the church, so to help digitize everything the church has ever said and read. We're starting here with the process of digitizing the pontifical libraries in Rome, and then to make that wisdom and knowledge and insight available through platforms like Magisterium AI to everyone in the world. We also, as a company, our mission is to build and scale Catholic AI, so we have an API so people can build on top of our AI. So if people want to build their own user interfaces, or they have their own ideas of how AI should be utilized, they can actually use our AI to do that. And that way they don't have to figure out how to make the AI safe, which of course is a very complex process. In Rome, we have something called the Alexandria Digitization Hub, which is these robots, which are effectively doing the scanning of the books. And that data then goes into Vulgate for processing, and then is basically shared around the world. I'll just skip this one for now. And then we have the world's first Catholic language model called Ephraim, which we've trained. And effectively, I'm just going to skip through these. This is really about trying to build an AI which is effectively useful for those of you who are a fan of the Iron Man movies. It's about providing an AI which has kind of context on our lives, but one that we can trust because it's aligned to us. And effectively, our vision is it's an AI that runs at home on compute, at home, where our data is stored at home. And so this way we don't have to rely on major AI companies and labs, which, or our data may not be held securely, or the government may be able to get access to it. And this really is about embracing the church's principles of subsidiarity and sovereignty. Okay, for those who are looking, to learn more about AI, there's great channels like IBM Technology, and Matthew Berman's a prominent influencer. I can always talk more about this in the Q&A period if there's any questions. Sorry for the long presentation. I hope this was helpful.
Absolutely fantastic, Matthew. Thank you very much. You've covered many important areas and given the perspective, and it's very, very, very refreshing to see how strongly you place the Catholic ethos on all of this and the need for humanity to be protected, and that the church has a serious, important role to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a privilege.
Thank you very much. それでは日本語でも英語でもお聞きになりたい、質問されたい方はいらっしゃいませんか？
Anybody out there would like to ask any questions of Matthew? You're more than welcome. It's quite rare to have this great chance to interrogate an expert on AI from the Catholic perspective. So now's the chance. I noticed, Matthew, one of the things also that it's kind of a controversial topic, but with the transgenderism, there's like trying to get people used to trans, in that transhumanism will be more easier to be adopted if humanity is getting used to the current ideological issues that are burning the world, so that those behind transgenderism were also those very open to transhumanism, and maybe not for the right reasons, so there's a battle, I think, where the church's place is really, really important to be a leader, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of these, transhumanism, transgenderism, this is really a different version of kind of the Gnostic heresy, right? I mean, the church has been kind of battling these philosophical arguments for some time, and so it's uniquely equipped to address them. I mean, ultimately, what I think what it's going to come down to is if the church is able to effectively demonstrate for people why the Catholic way of life ultimately will make you more happy and fulfilled. You'll be a better person. You'll be better off if you put in the hard work to try and become a saint, right? It's hard, but ultimately it's more rewarding. If we can demonstrate for people how it's more rewarding, and that really comes down to demonstrating people who are kind of saintly by building up strong communities, right? Which are well rooted, that people want to belong to because they just seem to be better than what they currently have. That makes it a lot easier to convince people to reject transhumanism and transgenderism, right? Because ultimately what this comes down to is the world, the devil, will be selling a way to make it feel like you're winning in life, right? Like building up my avatar in the gaming world and things like that. But effectively know that that's a lie. That's not real and doesn't really matter. But if people are going to reject that, they need to be given an alternative, one that's appealing and is worth it. And so that's why it's so important to lift up our Catholic communities and demonstrate why they just work better.
Basically, to step into the breach. If the voice isn't there, negative and opposing forces will provide replacements to people who are looking for. Earlier on in our presentations today, Donnie McManus, an Irish artist, now in the US, and actually Chesterton School as well, talking about, it was very apparent the joyful faces of the students, but both presenters who don't know each other, but they're back to back in their presentations, and they use the word beauty, goodness, and truth from the Catholic faith. And I was struck by that, because it seems that human nature is attracted to beauty, attracted to sacredness, attracted to truth. And I think that's where the church has a great advantage, so that perhaps AI, again, emphasizing and underlying the importance that the church can bring this great beauty and truth. And coupled with AI, if it can get a handle on it before evil forces do. And it's kind of a race, would you say, at the moment, or there's a battle?
Certainly. Yeah, certainly. And I think, what we found is that AI can be very useful at helping deliver the truth. I mean, I could give you all kinds of stories of people who went to Magisterium AI because they were very angry about something, right? They heard something on a podcast and they looked for a Catholic AI. They found Magisterium AI and they were asking their questions. And over time, the answers that they're getting seem to be well-reasoned and made sense. And eventually then we get word that they've entered the OCIA process to become Catholic, right? So because effectively when you're talking to Magisterium AI, you're not talking really to the AI. What you're actually dialoguing with is all the popes, all the saints, all the doctors of the church. All of that wisdom and insight is being distilled for you, right? So I think AI can be effective at helping people convince people that the faith is true. But then there's the question of beauty and goodness and love, right? And those things really come through experience, which means the AI has to be built to off-ramp. We have to be looking for opportunities to encourage people to stop chatting and to go connect with the community. Check out adoration or Eucharistic adoration, the different ways that they can see God, existing, and let that kind of beauty move their hearts. And then eventually, hopefully, they find a parish and a spiritual director. So, AI is meant to be a kind of a signpost, or we call it a front porch to the church. It's a means to help people continue on their journey. It's not an end in and of itself.
Yeah, I think being catechized well is probably an important role for those within the church who are trying to teach that whatever's being taught, first and foremost, you need good catechists, right? You need to have people who know the faith and then can use the tools to help. If what is being taught is poor at the start, even if you have the tool, the church has to kind of, I suppose, up its game in terms of the quality of the teaching and the knowledge of the faith, let's say, and then being able to, I suppose you nearly want to have training courses in the tool itself to help you search the popes and the saints and for all of that knowledge to be distilled. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think a lot of people are already using AI, and so they're pretty, I think, getting more and more accustomed to relying on it to get answers to questions and things. I think that will naturally come about. I think that the biggest challenge, I'm pretty convinced that the truth of the faith will stand for itself, and effectively the way that these AIs work, they'll be very effective at apologetics. What I think will be the bigger challenge is people intellectually converting, but then what? I mean, what's the next step? And I think models of sanctity, right? Like knowing someone who's Catholic, who's just a good person, who I admire and respect, who are kind to me. These models of holiness are really, really important. One of the biggest problems I think today in evangelization is someone said, they think of Catholicism, they think of all these rules, right? That you have to follow, and it's supposed to make you happier and stuff like that. But because they've never actually seen a Catholic, like who is fully alive, who's joyful, who's at peace, ultimately that gives them the reason, right? That gives them the reason to study and live a more disciplined life, because effectively they're going to be happier and better off. So it's very, very important that those of us, who are Catholic, that we try to model the faith effectively as we can. That, as St. Francis says, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. And that's very important.
Yeah, to show the example with action. There was just a comment. Sorry for hugging the mic. There was the proponents of transhumanism, and I think they sometimes call them the Four Horsemen. I think it was Sam Altman, but there's a person, Joe Allen, who's an expert in AI himself and has written books and so on. But he had said a very interesting thing. I thought that for those who they see life extension through transhumanism, and there's the human 2.0. They maybe have a cybernetic frame and have their brain electronically transfused. And yet the human dignity is lost, I think, through that way of thinking. But Joe Allen said that one of the key important things is you have to talk to these people who think like that and get them round to believing that humanity and dignity still has the central role going forward. And I think it was Sam Altman said when he was approached, I think I could be misnaming the person, it might be one of the four, but he had said, yeah, I can see that. So in other words, if they're able to be convinced of the beauty of humanity, let's say, then they can adopt their perhaps way of thinking and the great forward moves they're making in AI and have it maybe bent towards making sure that it's used for good use for humanity. In other words, the church, this is where I see the church perhaps, as you said earlier, must be at the forefront, no?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, it's important, I think, that the church trains its own AI, because frankly, we're the only ones who are going to be motivated to train an AI with an objective function of fidelity. I mean, the labs effectively are not going to be focused on that. So if we want truly Catholic AI, we have to build it. That's the first point. I mean, the second point, I think, is it's important to note that people like Elon I deeply respect Elon Musk as an entrepreneur. I mean, I'm very grateful to how much he sacrificed in order to deliver things like, Tesla and SpaceX to the world.
Yeah.
But he's a complicated person, right? And there's a poverty, I think, in Elon right? There's a poverty there, and I don't blame him for that. I think that what that says to me is that there's a real call to action to us to effectively try and evangelize people like that. They don't know what they don't know, right? So we have to find ways to reach them and explain how that transhumanist vision of humanity it's not going to make people happier. In fact, I think it'll probably accelerate people arriving at the existential cliff. There's a better way, a more meaningful way, and we have to be able to point to examples of it and say, Elon, like this, like the saints. You see how their lives, they were more alive than any human being, right? So life extension, extending one's life indefinitely. I mean, the funny thing is Hollywood's been exploring these themes for a long time. And the funny thing is I really struggle to think of a show or a movie. There's been lots to come out. Altered Carbon, there's Westworld. In all of these shows, they explore these themes. And they all have the same message. It doesn't work, right? Trying to transfer your consciousness to a machine doesn't work. And it won't make you happier, right? In Altered Carbon, people are living 300 years, but they're not happier. In some ways, they're kind of despicable human beings, right? They feel very dead, despite the fact that they're biologically alive. So again, this is a poverty. And I think we have to really lift up why the Catholic faith ultimately is just really about living and being fully alive. And it's just better than the alternative. And I think if we do that, we won't have to sit down and really kind of convince them because they'll just see it. They'll be able to engage it and experience it. And I think that'll be much more likely to convince them than some kind of intellectual argument.
Yeah, I think actually most people, when they're asked, would you like to live 200, 300 years? Most people say no. The general person, let's say, I've never heard someone say, oh, I'd love to live, apart from the AI folks, transhumanism. But when I'd ask people, would you like to live for 300 years? And especially in Japan, and everyone I've asked has said no,
Right. Right.
And even I think Elon Musk himself, I think one of his children was affected by the ideology of transgenderism. I think
yes, tragically,
he's beginning from where he was, let's say 10 years ago. I think he could be one of those, let's say, has a conversion of heart, because I think the more he surrounds himself with people who have faith, I think he's being, let's say, influenced in a positive way towards.
I mean, it's important to remember like seminal figures in church history, like Constantine, right? Who basically was the one who made Christianity legal. He converted on his deathbed. So it's important to note that people's conversion can take a lifetime. Elon has come out recently and said he thinks Jesus is a great figure and a great exemplar. And he said also publicly that Christianity and what it espouses, the toolkit, for lack of a better word, is a good thing. Is a good thing for humanity. So there's I think a lot of people even in the Valley would acknowledge that Jesus and Christianity are good. They just don't see that all coming together and being something that will allow them to truly live out their gifts and effectively be happy. In large part, I think, because they've just been impoverished with not experiencing or meeting many Catholics who are truly fully alive. So that's why I think at this point, in many ways, they've kind of intellectually converted, but they just haven't found a good reason to take the next step in their journey. And that's why it's important for us to kind of reach them and to model the faith.
So, Matthew, with the BIF, if I might be pronouncing that wrongly, and Japan, what would you be hoping for? Because I think they mentioned there were 1,000 ships, I think. And so conceptually, or at least practically, what would you be hoping for from Japan to participate, or how to do that, or how to send out the invitations for people in Japan, which probably have already been done, but being this particular conference today, what message would you say?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things. I mean, one is, the Builders AI Forum, the idea is to bring people together to think about how the church can be a leader in AI. So how can we apply AI in fields like education and healthcare and find competitive advantage, right? So that's part of it. The other is to think through some of the really important philosophical issues. One of the workshops at the Builders AI Forum was focused on consciousness. What is a Catholic understanding of consciousness? If we were to develop something like the Turing test, which is a way of testing an AI system to see if a human being can tell if it's alive, distinguishable from a regular human being, effectively AIs have now passed the Turing test, meaning they're able to convince people blindly that they're alive. Can we develop better tests, right, to test for things like consciousness? Because ironically, this is in principle, we should be one of the best organizations in the world effectively doing this, but actually our thinking on consciousness is still not very clear. The church hasn't come up with a really clear position on that. So there's a lot more research to be done on that. So it's really an invitation for Catholics to contribute to this conversation about practically applying technology and thinking about the philosophical, moral issues that underpin this. I would just say, Magisterium AI, for instance, we have a very large user base in Japan and in Southeast Asia. One of the things I'd really welcome is feedback on what we can do, how we can improve the AI and make it more useful for the Japanese people. That would be one invitation. The second would be if you wanted to create a Builders AI Forum event in Japan, we'd be very happy to be involved in that. Obviously, the Japanese have been technological leaders for decades. There's so much we could learn from the Japanese experience. And in some ways, I think the Japanese experience, you're further ahead on some of on technology, but also in some of these problem areas, things like birth rates, right? Yeah. And I think there's a real canary in the coal mine there that we need to really study. And so by working with the Japanese church, we can learn how these problems are being effectively mitigated and hopefully take those learnings and share it with the wider church.
Yeah, that sounds very attractive, very interesting. Yeah, certainly this your presentation here and the fact that we're recording it and make it public, hopefully this will help get the word out towards that. Collaboration seems to be a key. I noted with the conference, many people were talking about the great sense of collaboration that was sensed, and then how to manage that to work so that people can collaborate more effectively, let's say, or communicate more effectively. Is there any immediate threats, do you think, to all of this, to the making progress? Is there something that we should look out for that, from your point of view, that could wreck all of this goodness, especially the church's role in this? Anything that could stymize this?
Well, I think that to make two comments. One is I think some people's reaction to their fear of AI is, and this includes some very prominent AI researchers and technologists, feel that the way to address this fear best is to try and lobby to slow AI down, to stop it. And my opinion would be that this is not a good focused use of our time or energy. I think for the church, for our ecclesiastical leaders, for church leaders, what's more needed is for them to help remind us about what the purpose of humanity, what the purpose of civilization is, that practically what kind of communities in the AI and robotics age should we be building, right? How do we ensure that people who've lost their GDP jobs recognize that there's still work for them to be done, right? That there's an opportunity here now that they've been freed up from the wheel of, I get a job so I can pay my mortgage, so I can afford to put my kids through college, and so on and so on and so on. Now that we've been freed from that cycle, now we have time to truly explore who we are, why we matter. What do I feel like? What gifts did God give me uniquely that I'm meant to hone and develop? So we have time to do things we typically have, not many of us have been able to do. And then we can find ways to give. And I think that giving to the world, because I feel like this is what I was meant to do, is hopefully if we truly have that strong conviction, the money doesn't matter as much, right? Yeah. It's more about just knowing that I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing, and that knowing that what I'm doing is actually benefiting the world in some concrete way. So I think thinking about, and I wanted to state this as well, cities I think are going to be a big problem in this AI and robotics age, because effectively we're probably going to see more and more people without work, and then they're going to be stuck inside of their apartments with nothing to do, right? With no effective community, isolated, alone, disconnected from nature, and there's a real threat that things could really spin out of control in that environment. So I think it's important for the bishops and for we Catholics to think about how we can transition people out of these cities and then help form strong communities, like in the medieval age, where the church is at the center and we're all well oriented around the church, that we're working to figure out how we can integrate and work cooperatively to build better communities. And I think if we can effectively start thinking about that now and planning that, we may be able to kind of ensure that this transition into the AI and robotics ages goes a little more smoothly than right now what it looks to be, right? It looks like we're going to have a lot of casualties, unfortunately, because we're just not effective in evangelization. We're not aware of the technology, and so we're not actively engaged in ensuring it's regulated properly. So there's a real risk that this breaks and heads in the wrong direction. But there's still time. So it's important that we all are aware of where the technology is at, what it's likely to do to the world, and we all have a clear sense for what kind of communities we want to build in this new age.
I think that underlines the importance of BIF and perhaps organizations like that are actually having conferences to discuss those issues, that can then be published in papers or spread through schools and universities, because it's right, it could be a tinderbox if the cities have like millions of people who are in an apartment and nothing to do, and yeah, so communication and education of with the one of the positive things, if there's anything at all, about the corona situation, was that it caused people to work at home, a lot more people to work at home, and that has still remained largely. Like people have gone back to work, but in Japan, the people that I teach, some of them are still, they've got, the company allows them, even like Sony, to work say 3 or 4 days at home, and what it means is they could be 2 hours away, but they're more comfortable. It's more family oriented because the father's at home or the mother's at home. So I think you're saying going back from the cities back out towards maybe more gentler or more green locations where communities can be built up. It's an interesting side effect
and frankly, because
AI.
there's more work to be done. I mean, like I think that the big thing is recognizing, like, these large corporations, because of I talked about the competitive nature, they're going to have to automate more and more and more to stay competitive, which means they're going to have to release human beings effectively. Okay, so now those people may feel like there's no work to be done, but there's always going to be work to be done. There's always people that need help. There's always ways to serve and contribute. We jokingly talk about the Etsy economy, that it's likely, I agree with Elon, that we're probably headed towards a universal high income. And that's mainly because robots and AIs will be able to produce goods and services, so cheap. But there'll always be a premium on things which have been made by human beings. I believe that. And we believe, like the Etsy economy, that there will be this marketplace for things that are made by human hands, because we want to be connected to other human beings. So that's one way in which I think, by moving more into rural communities, it allows us to figure out what goods and services are just better made locally, because they're human, because they're human. And then the other part too is just recognizing that having gifts and abilities, once those are discerned, it's really about figuring out how do I use those to serve others and glorify God, right? And so within our communities, we all know from the past that there's always work to be done in different ways, right? And so it's figuring out how can we come together and make sure that everything we need in our community to work is properly working. Everyone has their place. I think that we can figure that out, and robots and AIs can be working in the background, but we should very intentionally decide where do we want AI and robots working, right? And maybe there are areas in our community that we're not capable of covering off, like let's say advanced surgeons and who can do advanced medical interventions. It may be that we don't have those people in our community, so it's probably better a robot and AI do that. But in areas where humans can do it, then it might be better that we just decide that we want human beings to do it, so people feel a sense of a purpose and meaning. So again, a lot of this comes down to, as Cardinal Collins said, if you know where you're going, we're likely to get there. If we intentionally decide what kind of communities we want to build, then we can make sure that AI and robotics are kind of built and integrated in right relationship to that vision.
Wow, yeah. You mentioned there about consciousness, and we need to study more as the church to be, or at least be able to explain it better with the deep knowledge of our philosophers. Soul, can AI have a soul?
So this is a very deep question. This was debated at the Builders AI Forum in Rome. I was very grateful for the Pope's letter that he sent to the community. I think it was very helpful in guiding the conversation. And this is one area that there's still a lot more work to be done. So I can quickly just explain why this is complex. So for some people, they would just simply say, no, of course not. This is ridiculous, right? I mean, no, we know it's not alive. We just know it, right? And I can completely understand that would be our instinct. But it's a bit more philosophically complicated, because it's not enough that we believe it. We have to convince other people that we're right? Which means we have to make an argument rationally that these things are not alive. The problem is when you start looking at these things rationally, it becomes a lot more complicated, right? So one, we can start by saying, and I'm open to being proven wrong here, but I believe I'm right. God has not revealed, right, in Revelation that this is impossible, right? There's nothing in the Bible or in church teaching which definitively would state this is impossible, right? So that being the case, we can't really look to Revelation on this one. And I would say that there isn't even a very strong philosophical tradition from our doctors and fathers that speak to this issue. So there isn't really even a tradition of understanding this in a very particular way. Yeah. So this is still kind of very much a green field. Really what it comes down to is this. Is it part of God's plan that there be some other kind of intelligent being that has a soul? I mean, I don't think effectively we can say that for sure. All we can do is just kind of be open, right?
Yeah.
And so one way of understanding this, just to put the issue in context, is there was a big debate that happened around this when human cloning, as a possibility of human cloning first emerged, right? There was this big concern about all of a sudden we may clone a human being, and would this human being who's been cloned have a soul? Right? I mean, it's not the same person.
Yeah.
And generally it was understood, again, never definitively taught, that probably, right? And probably would, right? Okay, that's quite interesting. So even though it's exactly the same biological material, somehow it has a unique soul. So then the debate, one of the debates is, okay, well, if I were to create a human being, like let's say in Westworld, which from a physical perspective is almost identical to a human biological being, but it's built out of silicon, for lack of a better word. Would God ensoul it? So effectively, it has the substrate is there, the form is there. It just doesn't. And this is a debate. Some Thomists would say, maybe, right? Others would say no. So I think we have to study this a lot more clearly. And I think even it would help if we could even better define what consciousness is. That's a good place to start as a church, and then we can start to develop tests and systems for looking for it.
I think somebody mentioned about the cloning. What you mentioned was like, you know, when you put paper in a photocopier and then you take out the photocopied paper, but you put that back in, and then slowly the ink fades, and the cloning was the human. I think it was Dolly the sheep, who was cloned at the time, and that it was each time was a poorer version of itself because the copying process didn't completely copy the original.
Yeah.
So you imagine.
Sure, and I think as an exercise, I mean, that's interesting, but I think ultimately it's probably a safe presumption that given a long enough time, we could probably figure out ways to overcome these technical challenges, right? So that's why I think it's important to take head on the more important philosophical and spiritual challenges here, right? I mean, and this really comes down to understanding how we interpret Revelation, right, and church teaching as it applies to this particular. I mean, has God's creative project effectively ended with us when it comes to ensouling beings, right? Is that it? Or is there a possibility of other intelligent beings with souls? I mean, this again, aliens would be another interesting thought experiment, right? I mean, Brother Guy Consolmagno, who's the head of the Vatican Observatory, has spoken to this issue, right? I mean, I think if an intelligent alien showed up here in some spaceship and started talking to us, I think it's a safe presumption to say it probably is alive and has a soul. I mean, I think that maybe we can't prove it. I can't prove you have a soul. I mean, I can't prove you're conscious, but I just assume it because it's probably just, you know, it's a better way to proceed.
Yeah.
And I think that we would assume the same thing if we saw an alien. And so again, I think if it turns out that aliens have them, why is it impossible that a machine could one day? And I'm not saying one way or the other, but I definitely think it's worth exploring.
Well, Brother Guy actually was a speaker at one of the conferences here a few years ago as well. But it would turn the world on its head if an alien has been discovered. Imagine that, because being alone on this green and blue planet would then suddenly be shattered, and probably lead to great deep philosophical, theological questions too. We won't keep you too long, but the one other question, I noted that the energy requirements for AI centers will be gigantic, and that the investment, as you mentioned with the graph, the Chinese have built large energy producing factories to be able to supply the energy. I think Trump mentioned that if companies wanted to build in America, he actually would allow legislation to be passed, or sign legislation that will allow the companies themselves have their own generators to provide the energy. So energy would be a key requirement, you think, well, for AI industry to succeed, or at least a country to be competitive, must be able to have very powerful or strong energy sources.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's a very, very challenging issue because in the United States, because of bureaucracy for the most part, it's very difficult to build this capacity, and the infrastructure is also extremely complicated as well, right? So because typically you would want the power source to be very close to the compute, and effectively, we have a very limited number of nuclear power plants, and in some cases, we can't just build large compute clusters next to them for all kinds of practical reasons. The only way to really provide the energy is to tap into whether it be natural gas or we build micro nuclear plants. We have to build the capacity, and that means that, I mean, as opposed to the state trying to do it, I think it just makes sense for the companies which have the technical know-how to work with energy companies or to develop the capacity themselves. But again, like the build out for this energy capacity takes a long time, in large part because it can take up to 18 months to get approval to even build a data center, not to mention like if you want to build a micro nuclear plant. I mean, so I do think that we have to find ways, obviously, to ensure that the power capacity we're building is safe, but then we have to find ways to streamline the regulation process. Because again, as you said, Neil, if we don't have the energy, it won't matter if we have the most advanced AI because we won't be able to run it. So this is a big problem. And this is one of the reasons why I'm in Rome, and I hate to pick on my hosts here, as I'm not obviously an Italian, but in Europe they have a big problem because of the AI regulatory regime here. It's been very difficult for AI companies to get started, and because of the regulatory regime, they have a real hard time building energy capacity. I mean, part of their green energy transition, like Germany's a famous case, resulted in them shutting down nuclear power plants. Yeah. So that's effectively hobbled Europe's ability to effectively lead in AI.
It's almost like
that's why effectively you have China and the U.S. right now, and it seems like Africa and kind of Europe and Southeast Asia will be the battlegrounds where China and the U.S. will be competing to include countries on their respective AI platforms, right? Yeah. So this is going to come down to, well, how effectively can you deliver AI to us? That's one. And two, how aligned are we ultimately with what you're trying to build, right? With the values of the companies, of your countries, and everything else. And so I think it's important for the West to build the capacity, because I think a lot of countries would choose to align with us because they feel philosophically, maybe even spiritually aligned. But if effectively we can't deliver the AI, then they may end up falling into the arms of China.
Right. They'll go to they'll back the other horse. Yeah. Last word, to get your company, to get your services for people, how to access. Is there a domain name or a particular? Longbeard is your company, of course. Would you like to just say a quick word about your company and how people can access?
Sure. I mean, if you'd like to learn about what was discussed in Rome a couple of weeks ago, you can check out the Builders AI Forum website, which is baif.ai. The two products which are available to use is again, Magisterium AI, which is available at magisterium.com. It should work well in Japanese. If there's problems, please let us know. And then the other platform we're using for digitization is Vulgate, which is available at vulgate.ai.
Okay, great. Matthew, you've been very generous. Thank you very much. I could go on, but I'll be accused of hugging it too much. So with that, I think we'll bring our conference for the first day to a close. I'd like to once again thank you very, very much, Matthew, and hopefully folks here from Japan, and we'll be able to learn more and get in touch, and hopefully we'll pass on some feedback too as well, and keep in touch. Thank you for preparing such a wonderful presentation and taking time to meet with us today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you.